So how about them coin burns, man?
Coin burns? I burn my CD.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
You should have saw that one coming. Come on now.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is kind of a controversial episode. I can already hear my inbox heating up about it on Reddit. What do you mean coin burn? What the hell?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been written all over the place. It's just whether or not they've read everything, right?
It's kind of funny. It's actually on the Explorer itself. TurtleCoin emission schedule change. Read the blog articles below to learn more. And then there's 6 articles.
Six articles, and then if they've been paying attention, the network stats on the front page of the Explorer shows that all of a sudden the total supply dropped from 1 trillion coins to, what is that, 125 billion?
Yeah. So for the people that only read the headlines, let me boil it down for you real fast. V2 means, I think, roughly an 87% coin burn of the total supply. Is that figure correct? 87 point something percent?
Yeah, it's right around 87.5%. Little less for change, but it is what it is. But yeah, there's a massive burn coming in accordance with the V1 supply.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious why nobody's really thought of that, or I don't know. Kind of weird. But basically, because to kind of sum it up, let me know if I have this understanding correct.
Sure.
Well, I hope I do. So in V2, we switch to a as needed emission schedule, whereas now, whether we have transactions waiting or not, we produce a block every 30 seconds, whether it's empty or not. And that extra block being put on the chain incurs a reward of, I don't know, I think right now it's like 26,000 turtle or something like that.
Yeah,
and starting at the beginning of the swap, it'll start going down, I suppose. And then whenever we start V2, then it will be an emission schedule. I don't know if I've seen it in any other network, but basically we only emit coins whenever fees are paid, and the network matches a multiple of those fees, correct?
Correct. So, just to kind of reiterate a couple of those points there again, taking a look at the currency supply on the Explorer, we see that ramp down rather quickly, starting with block 4 million all the way down to block 5 million, right? And we go from what is the expected emission, right, on V1, which at the start of block 4 million is still right around about 26,500 coins. As we get down to block 5 million, though, the block reward basically works its way down to 0. So that way, when we hit block 5 million and the chain stops, the reward stops as well.
That's going to be interesting to see. And, it's kind of surprising that there's so much scrutiny applied to things like the significant digits, or I guess you should say the decimal or dust issue. So much attention is placed on that, but nobody really says anything about the emission being cut. Basically, all of it, basically. So,
well, for sure, and then as we go into V2, as you said, the entire emission schedule is based upon it. Well, not even really a schedule anymore, right? It's based on the fact that when people use the network, we're going to emit coins. And a couple of the questions that people have kind of asked about that has been along the lines of, well, what stops emission from running away at that point? What stops that train from just keep rolling? And next thing you know, there's millions of coins minted, a day in V2. And the easiest way that I've kind of come to explain that to people is rather simple. When you take it from the standpoint that a V2 transaction is going to have a bare minimum fee of 0.01 turtle, and we're setting it up so that we probably, 95% or more transactions are probably going to fall into that minimum transaction fee, unless you're doing some advanced things, whether it's putting a messenger on the chain or throwing additional data on the chain. That's what most people are going to pay. So when you break out the math, I mean, even for us to emit, 1 turtle as part of that emission on top of the transaction fees, that means that people have to have 100 transactions in the block. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you think about how do we get to 1 million turtle emitted, I mean, we're talking about 100 million transactions that have to take place to emit, if we're doing a 1-to-1 ratio, as you said, a multiple, we have to do 100 million transactions to emit 1 million V2 turtle.
Yeah, that's a lot of usage too, and you can't just sit there and spam up the chain and just say, "Hey, I'm a block producer now, or I'm a verifier now. Let me just spam up the chain and reap the rewards." From what I understand, that doesn't necessarily compute to you making those rewards. Is that correct?
That is correct. One of the things that we talked through when we were first kind of putting through the plan was largely based around the idea that we needed to find a way to make sure that you couldn't game the system, or at least do the best that we could to make sure that you're not gaming that system. And the way that we did that, of course, is by putting into place the staking system and the way that the rewards are broken down. So to kind of reiterate what we've talked about in the previous blog articles, the block rewards, including the transaction fees, are not going 100% to the block producers. There's a percentage that go to the block producers. I don't have the article right in front of me, but there's a percentage that goes to them. There's a percentage that goes to the block validator or one of the block validators. And then there's a percentage that goes to the people that backed that producer, and another percentage that goes to the people that, or the wallets that backed that validator. So it actually, each block reward, including those transaction fees, gets divided up between like 22 different people. And when I say 22 different people, yes, they're randomly chosen from the standpoint that it is a deterministic random or pseudo-random algorithm that goes through to select who is getting paid for each block, other than, the producer and the validator that did their job. So there's no guarantee that by you generating a whole bunch of transactions, paying those fees, that those rewards are going to come back to you. And then there's also the flip side that by us building that proof of work that's required as each one of those as part of one of those transactions that you send, it's going to be difficult to just keep spamming transactions in there. Not only is it going to cost you, that 0.1 turtle, but it's also going to take resources and time to complete that proof of work requirement to be able to submit a transaction. So the chances of it running away are probably pretty slim, when you take all that into account.
It's also a big gamble.
Well, what do you mean by that, bud?
Well, I mean, it's a gamble. If you were to try and make your money that way, odds are that you're going to lose.
Oh, fair enough. And there's definitely, I'm sure that somebody will come up with some way, right? To kind of game the system, so to speak. There's always inherently somebody that's smarter or faster or just has enough time on their hands to find these things. But that's the beauty of, at the end of the day, it's an open source project, right? We can make changes, we can make proposal changes, we can change how the network operates to account for that. But even some of the discussions that we've had with some of the users floating around in Discord, there was a good one, I think it was about 2 months ago, where a gentleman came in and was talking through how that election process works. And he goes, man, I think I can play this. And it took a little bit of beating around the bush to kind of get to how he thought that he could play it. And in some of those discussions, he did help me realize that, hey, look, this probably was an opportunity for how that election system could be played. And as a result, I actually made a small change, and I don't even know that anybody that's got access to the repo right now even noticed it. But I made a small change to the election process in how it compared, candidates that had the same number of votes. So if somebody voted for me or enough people voted for me that I had 5 votes and you had 5 votes, there has to be a way to decide who's going to take the 5 vote slot. And that was the change that I made. So it wasn't based upon anything necessarily that you or I could pre-establish and do for our candidacy, but it increased or added a bit of variability there. So it was a little more fair to try to remove some of that gaming, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty cool. I'm glad that the community feels that they can bring it to our attention and, provide some supporting arguments for why they think certain things will play out. I think part of being a developer, um, we spend so much time focusing on what the machines will do, but we don't often think enough about the social element and what people might do and how things may play out that way. So it's good to find out these things before they become a problem.
Oh, agreed. And that's been part of the discussions back and forth and trying to help people understand, hey, look, here's the changes that are coming, here's what we're planning on doing, here's how this will play out. And some of the best ways in some of my prior lives that I've learned to explain things or even to solidify ideas in my own mind is to have to answer, questions and defend it, right? It's kind of the same concept as defending a thesis, in academia, right? As people come and they present logical, solid arguments and walk you through, like, hey, look, I think X, Y, Z doesn't make sense. Then it helps you make better choices, right? It's the opportunities there for people to come and ask those questions and help firm up and shape it because it's still under development, right? And it always will be under development, but they have to approach it in a way that is constructive, and that's part of what we strive for, right? Is part of that constructive criticisms or constructive additions or thought processes that people bring to the table. So we welcome that type of stuff. But it still boggles my mind that people haven't given much thought to the fact that I mean, even as we talk about it now, that we're cutting 87.5% of the emitted supply, and then we don't know where it's going from there, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like an infinite tail emission. We just don't know what it's going to do, but it's going to be there. It's going to reward people for validating and producing blocks, for doing transactions, in a way. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. And speaking of the social element, I wonder how many people out there haven't been paying attention for the past, I don't know, year or so that we've been putting out V2 updates and will try and accuse us of operating a 3-year long pre-mine. Have you considered that?
3 year, a 3 year
Or a 4-year
long
long
pre-mine.
pre-mine? It's got to be the
I
most
thought
well
about that.
publicized pre-mine in history.
Yeah, I thought about that a little bit because to that point, users have come in and they've complained and they're like, I've been mining for 3 years. What the hell's happening to my coins, right? And I think that should be our standard answer back now. Like, dude, you've been part of the longest pre-mine in history.
Yeah, it's like 30,000 people or something like that, at least we've seen in Discord.
Well, not even that. I mean, you take your 30,000 plus the countless other miners that just hop on and off of the pools over time, right? Or all the people that we don't hear about that only exist on the exchanges that have been part of the process. Whether we actively realize that sometimes or not, those were users at one point or another, or the people that only hop on to Reddit or, God forbid, Telegram or whatever it is, right? There's tons of users that we don't know about that they're all part of the largest pre-mine in history.
Yeah, think about that a lot. Like there's so many people that, every week it seems like there's a different issue that like 4 or 5 people get really focused on. And I don't want to say like gang up on us or anything like that, but just kind of bombard us at one time. You got to address this. So-and-so network's doing this. You got to address this. And it kind of makes me wonder sometimes. Every time I'm thinking about like acquiescing to their demands, it makes me think like how many people would scream about it if we did make this change, and what if it's a bigger group of people that's even more angry about it? And then after a while, the only conclusion I could really arrive at is just do the best job that I can and hopefully the majority of the people are happy about it, you know?
Agreed, agreed. And I think I saw a chat along those lines the other day where somebody, it might have even been you, said, look, there's a lot of people that are part of the community, right? We can't make everybody happy. There's no way that we can make everybody happy, especially when we think about, some of the things that we've talked about in the past, including there's only so many people that come in and actively contribute to the project. And when I say actively contribute, I mean the documentation. It's more than code. It's part of the social presence as well. There's only so many people with so much time, right? So obviously, to that extent, what's going to get done is going to be what people feel is the most important, that's driving them to participate. If you can get people on board with your ideas, great. But in all honesty, when you fly in and throw a suggestion on the table with your hands on your hips and then leave the chat, you obviously didn't care that much.
I call that giving advice by hostage.
Giving advice by hostage. I like it.
Yeah, I've been a victim of that in the past, and while it's great to have people that are, obviously, if people are feeling that strongly about things, obviously they care about TurtleCoin, as inane as their concerns may be sometimes. And not to say that everybody has inane concerns, but sometimes we do get like really weird suggestions and things that it mainly boils down to, hey, network XYZ achieved great fanfare doing this scammy thing here, whether it be a giant coin burn or some other stuff. People show up with all types of ideas.
What was the one I saw? Was it today or a couple of days ago, where they were complaining about the transaction fees, and they mentioned something about feeless transactions, right? Free transactions. What do you mean I have to pay for transactions? Shouldn't they all be free?
And I think that guy eventually came around, but I really badly, like I try not to throw shade on any other projects, and everybody gets caught with their pants down in some regard. For us, it was mining sometimes, but I just wanted to point to like the Nano network, which is great network, noble goals and great development. But, they recently got caught up in the middle of a spam attack because they have feeless transactions. And so it became a little bit dicey for a while, sending transactions on the network for a couple of days, and it became a situation where, one guy is trying to validate the backed up history, and another guy's helping out, and it became very much like a team. It kind of reminded me of the early days of TurtleCoin. It became a team effort to kind of defeat a greater evil, and I think they're past it now. But it was kind of something that resonated to me where I saw it and I was like, this kind of drives the point home that there has to be some form of fee, some type of drawback to hold somebody back from just spamming the chain with unneeded transactions. During the normal course of using the chain in a normal way, or even operating a service that may make a high volume of transactions, if you're using it normally, those fees shouldn't really be a huge deal to you. And it really only holds back somebody that's a spammer. So, I can't, given that we're not really catering to microtransactions, I really can't think of any use case that requires somebody to spam the chain rapidly for little or no cost.
Agreed. I agree with that 100%. I mean, even some of the stuff that I was thinking about that people have done on chain in the past, whether it's a messenger, right? I know somebody did a chat application. I don't think I ever actually saw it myself.
Somebody did a video application too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can still do those things on chain, and certainly, like many other networks, you're going to pay more for those transactions. You're putting data on the chain, you're going to pay more for it. But at the same time, when you're paying more, then the network's getting paid, right, to handle that for you and make sure that that data moves around. So, to your point, people that are doing those types of things are used to paying those fees. I mean, just the same as practically every other network out there has some form of network transaction fee. And there's a floor typically on all of these. Really, when I think about it, the only networks that have some kind of a fee-free transaction, aside from Nano and a couple other ones out there, right? Largely center around a lot of the crypto note currencies, right? Because of the need for fusion transactions to roll those pennies up. But even going into V2, as we've talked about before in some of the blog articles, there while there can be a fusion per se where you can combine your coins and roll them up into single outputs, they're not going to be free anymore. I mean, that's part of the spam that we've ran into in the past, is just dealing with everybody rolling their coins. And while that emission change and the swap amount helps to eliminate that dust, people are still going to have to combine stuff together. You know, they're going to do it, but now it's not a free process per se. So, you know, if you are carrying around a whole bunch of outputs that need to be rolled together, just like using a coin start, you got to pay a little bit to kind of roll it up. I think we've made a lot of good decisions, is what I guess I'm trying to get to when it comes around to the fees, the transaction POW, all those things to help kind of smooth out and slow down some of the things that we know have caused issues in the past and that we've seen other projects experience issues with, right?
Yep. Well, like, at the end of the day, it's data that's going on a chain that everybody is going to have to sync. If it were me, everybody that designs, a P2P messenger or a distributed video service or something like that, I'd prefer if they use a second layer solution for that, whether it be IPFS or Karai with IPFS, whatever they end up using. I can't really get behind storing anything but just transactional data and maybe at the most a small snippet of metadata on chain. There's really no reason for it, but I'm sure there's probably some use cases that I'm just failing to think about. But it just seems like we should focus on doing one thing and doing it well, and that's passing transactions back and forth, because there's going to be a certain segment of people that are going to complain about the free fusions being gone, when in V2 you don't necessarily even need fusions unless you're trying to reduce transaction size, and it's not even a huge deal because the transaction size is shrinking so much. So I think that the amount of people that are going to complain about a huge sync that happened because of too permissive transaction limits, I think that number of people will be a greater number of people inconvenienced by a long sync than by the fees being marginally too high for sending 1,000 transactions rapidly.
I agree with that 100%. And, when we talk about that extra data in the transactions, one of the things that I got to be honest, I don't even know that I've really vocalized this or talked about it too much in even some of our discussions, is that the design of the transaction structures going into V2 allow us to ignore a lot of that extra data. I mean, even a wallet sync process. So while the chain could potentially carry quite a bit of data, especially with some of the pruning, right, that's planned in there and that works, obviously in some of the proof of concept code. Um, the chain necessarily doesn't need to get bloated by that. But to your point, we've seen a lot of success and a lot of things built on top of the existing chain, even with that extra amount of data being limited to 1 kilobyte, which is enough, to your point, to include a tag or a marker or content ID to IPFS or whatever it may be. It doesn't take much.
That's way more than enough.
Well, it's way more than enough when you remember that I've plucked the public keys for the transactions out of the extra field. Payment IDs are gone. We're going to require the use of subwallet addresses. I mean, all this stuff. We don't need minor nonces and pool nonces and things like that. All of that just disappears or can go into a more structured field. So at the end of the day, our extra field, as we like to call it today, it can be, a max limit of 64, bytes. And generally speaking, that's a lot of data. You
That's
can
ample.
store pretty good sized hash, inside of 64 bytes or 128, whatever we set it to, right? It doesn't have to be a K anymore.
Yeah. That definitely kind of, I guess, opens up the box about pruning. You want to roll that beautiful pruning footage for us and dive into it a little bit deeper?
Roll that beautiful pruning footage. I love it. So we're going to have to talk to, what's the dog's name? Jed? Is that his name? Yeah, Jed's never telling.
There's probably a whole 2 generations of people out there that are like, what the fuck are these guys talking about?
That have no idea what we're talking about because they've never seen a Bush's Baked Beans commercial from the 90s or 2000s. Sorry, kids. I know that a lot of you are under the age of 30 or in some cases under the age of 25, but there was internet before then. But anyway, swinging back to pruning, right?
They have no clue where the beef is.
Yeah, exactly. So on the pruning side of things, one of the things that we've put together and that I know that we haven't, or that I haven't really explained in a lot of the tongue-tied, that I have not explained in a lot of blog articles recently, is that the transactions themselves are going to be prunable. And when I say that they're prunable, there is data that, because we're moving to a proof of stake model, does not need to be retained indefinitely as part of the chain that is managed by nodes. So to kind of dive down into some of the technical details here, there's a couple of important pieces in each transaction that allows us to actually transact on the network. At a very high level, there's inputs, the possible previous outputs that are being spent. And I say possible because it's a ring. We don't know which one is actually being spent in that ring, but there's a set of inputs. There's a set of new outputs that are generated that say, hey, look, here's funds, they're going to XYZ. We don't know who they're going to. And then there's key images. Those key images are what's referred to as cryptographic linking tags that allow us to definitively say whether or not a key has been previously spent or an amount of funds, a previous output has been spent. Because if we see that same key image again, we know that it's somebody attempting to double spend funds. So we can tell the network to prevent that. So again, at the high end or at the high level, there's 3 parts: inputs, outputs, and those key images. Those are some of the most important pieces of the transaction. However, it all comes together when we talk about a transaction coming down to the signatures. The signatures, or the rig signatures that are in use, are what prove to the network that we have the private key for the funds that are being spent. And that proof is basically a zero knowledge proof. I hate to steal that phrase because it's not entirely true, but the only thing that we reveal is the signature and the public keys that are used in the ring. And that private key signs off on that without ever revealing, of course, that private key. And people are able to validate those signatures to say, yes, you signed it. It is legitimate. It is being spent. We know that that's real. In V2, we add on additional information via the Bulletproofs Plus that validates that the masked amounts that are coming into play here are within a certain range. So basically, they're a non-negative amount to the maximum of a 64-bit number space. So
did you just slip in the definition to range proofs?
I'm sorry, say that again, Rock.
I said, did you just slip in the definition to range proofs all sly like that?
I may have.
Talk to me. Let's hear it.
Talk dirty to you. Okay.
I said talk nerdy to me.
Oh, nerdy. Oh, well, nerdy, dirty, in my house, they're both the same. So Yeah, so range proofs, without getting too far off the rails here, the goal of range proofs is to basically play a game where it allows people to answer questions or challenges about something that they're attesting to be true without ever revealing what it is that they're talking about. So, to put it in real simple terms, because I know that probably sounded like a little bit of a tongue-tied mess, it's like playing 20 questions, but the person that you're asking the questions to never tells you what the object is, but you're able to guess with near 100% certainty that they at least have the object that they're describing. Does that make sense?
It does.
So the idea here is that we can prove to people with a range proof that we know what that value is. I mean, whether it's 1, 10, 100, 1,000, or any number, right? We can prove to them without a doubt that we know what that value is without ever telling them what that value is, or at the end of the day, it's really just yes, no questions, for lack of better words, that they ask a question and we say yes or no, and by them asking enough questions or issuing enough challenges, they have a pretty reasonable, provably reasonable understanding that we know for sure what that value is. And what that range proof does then, as I said before, is proves that the value is, 0 to the maximum of a UNT64. So we know that it's within that specific range. It's not more than 64 bits. It's not less than 0. It's somewhere within that range. So anyways, I digress there just a little bit, but when we're talking about the transactions, that range proof is also included in that transaction, which is great. We need to be able to verify that range proof, as I said, and take the challenges and apply them to that range proof and verify that what somebody is proving to us is real, which is something that in a proof of stake scenario, we are trusting the producers and the validators to do so. And when I say that go ahead.
I was about to jump into that next, actually, and ask you about that, because I think that was one of the first legitimate criticisms that we got in response to the aggressive pruning tech.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So the trust factor of the chain basically boils down like this. Excuse me. Is we are staking, right? Our candidates for those producers and those validator spots. They're putting skin in the game. They're putting Turtle at risk to take these spots. In addition to that, people have to vote these candidates, into those producers and validator spots. So again, people are putting funds on the line to back these candidates. And as a result, as part of that election process, we are, in essence, handing them a delegated authority, right? Delegated proof of stake, to mint or create new blocks containing transactions. Real simple. That's what we're trusting them to do. If they don't do their job, we go and we beat their hands with a ruler, right? We go and penalize them for not doing their job or not doing their job correctly. So how do we do this? It's all about validating those signatures and those proofs when the transactions are sent to the network, when they're in the mempools. Everybody is validating those transactions. They're taking a look at those. They're validating that the signatures are correct, because again, we need the public keys, the inputs, and a little bit of other information there to validate the signatures. We all can validate the range proofs, because that's all just proving that the mass numbers within the amount. All that validation takes place. So if somebody was to try to include a transaction inside of a block with an invalid signature or a falsified signature or an invalid range proof, we know that transaction is bullshit, and that block is bullshit, right? So we're able to trust the network at that point and the producers and the validators. And I saw you light up there. Were you going to throw something in there?
Yeah, I was going to say, and then we throw their money into the shadow zone.
The shadow zone, the shredder, the round file, all that kind of good stuff, right? We just start slashing away at their funds until there's nothing left. It'll be like a Friday the 13th movie before we know it, right?
Yeah, we get asked about that a lot, actually. People ask us in reference to Slasher, the Ethereum, I guess, function or algorithm that roasts coins if there's a bad actor in the pool.
That would be I Burn My Coins.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. Yeah, I love it. So anyways, we're trusting the producers and their validators in essence to kind of do their job, right? That's what their job is to validate transactions, put them in a block, move along, right? The entire network can hold them accountable and say, hey, wait a minute, it wasn't your turn to do that, or wait a minute, that doesn't jive. When we do that and we're instilling that trust there, because the network is able to proceed and create those blocks and we allow those blocks to be created and the chain progresses, we then know that once a transaction is included in a block, that range proof and that signature had to have been correct to be included in a block. You following me so far?
I smell what you're stepping in.
Exactly. So because we allowed that to happen, it must be true. We don't have to, at that point, carry around the full signature or the range proof for the entire rest of, history, or not history, for the entire future that we could foresee. We don't need to carry around that baggage anymore because the work's already been done to validate it and make sure that it should be included. This is different from proof of work, right? When we talk about proof of work, when miners are mining the chain, every node is going through and validating the chain from scratch. The reason that they have to validate all that information from the get-go is to make sure that none of the miners, in essence, or the pools or the nodes that served up the information to create those blocks lied along the way, because it is completely trustless system, right? That's the whole basis of POW. Now, I'm not saying that POS or proof of stake is not completely trustless, right? But there is an aspect of trust that's put into play by people putting their money behind candidates. They're saying, I trust that you're going to do a job. Let's take that trust and turn that into something actionable. And that's ultimately what drives the pruning process, is because, like I said, the block was created. It contains the transaction. The transaction was validated. Why do I need to carry around the proof that that it was valid forever, right? The block happened. That is the proof.
So what percentage of the overall block? I understand there's a difference in the way we do signatures in V1 with borrow sigs and the ways that we do signatures in V2, but what would the overall portion of the block in V1 be signature-wise on average? Is different for every transaction and every block with all the transactions in it. But I'm trying to assemble like a rough visual, or maybe like a percentage guess of how much that actually adds up to that we end up pruning.
Sure. So to put this in perspective, let's say that we're spending one. We'll keep it simple. We're spending one input, and we've got one output, and a signature in V1. Pretty straightforward and simple. There's a little bit of header overhead, byte wise. It probably accounts for maybe about a dozen or so bytes. You've got a key image that's 32 bytes. I hope you're running a calculator, because I'm not, or I shouldn't lie. I'm writing it down right now. We've got a key image that's 32 bytes. An amount, is roughly about 62 bytes. So, bear with me while we're tallying this up. We've got a couple of input offsets, which are basically pointers on the chain to the public keys that are involved in the input set itself for the signature. They're It varies a little bit depending on what's there, but let's say that we've got 10 bytes for that. And then on our output is an output key. So that's another 32 bytes plus an amount, let's call it 6 on the high end. And then we've got a transaction public key for another 32 bytes.
You're starting to sound like my accountant with all of these figures and like, well, this and well.
I mean, we've talked about this before, right? I mean, my people are good with numbers. So 30, just kind of following along here. I've got 64, 90, 96, and some stragglers there. Let's call it 110 bytes just to round it off real simple. And I know that that's a gross estimation. So that's just for the foundation of the transaction, or what we would normally call the transaction prefix, 110 bytes.
And that's just one in and one out. And in V1, we sign each individually, correct?
We sign each input individually. So what that means is, with a ring size of 3, a ring size of 4, which is 3 mix-ins as we do today, each one of those signatures then is, 4 times 64, because it's a 2-part key in essence, or I should say a 2-part scalar in the signatures. So you've got 256 bytes there for the signature itself. So the signature in that case, right, is just over twice as big as the actual transaction data, or the transaction prefix data, the meat and potatoes there. So it makes up, 2/3 of the transaction size, if that's
we're keeping all of that.
Yeah, and we're keeping all of that today. I mean, so even from the standpoint of going into V2, if we changed nothing about the signatures other than or the range proofs and didn't include any of that stuff, if we just went into straight V2 and said, I want to do pruning, we would chop down the size of the transactions, anywhere from, I'll call it 0 to 80%, right? And I say 0 because God knows how many outputs people have and stuff, or how many inputs, or all the other pieces that come into play that just kind of add up very quickly. So we save a lot of space by doing this. And as a matter of fact, I think in one of the articles that I put together where I first introduced the fact that we're going to be bringing pruning across is that at the end of the day, and again, these numbers were based on Arcturus at the time, and if you listen to our last one, our storage requirements for transactions, generally speaking, in V2 would be 96% smaller than our current transactions.
So looking at our 150 gigabyte chain, let's just assume 3 years into V2 with the same shenanigans and whatnot.
Well, let's consider that the
that's like 4.5 gigabytes.
It's a lot more than that, buddy. It's a lot more.
No, I'm saying that's what the total size would end up being. It'd be like 4.5 gigabytes.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. There's probably a little bit of overhead for block data and stuff like that, but our current chain would be itty bitty, and it would sync so fast.
And it would fit in RAM.
It would fit in RAM, which would be great for some database systems, right? Like memory map databases. Just saying.
The hair on my arms just stood up. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, you see how this stuff is all kind of coming together as we're talking about it out loud, right? It's actually pretty cool. I do get excited about it sometimes because at the end of the day, it's not. I hate to say it this way. Some of the stuff that we're doing isn't brand new. The concepts are there. Different projects have done different pieces of these, and we're bringing our own mix to it with the way that we're doing the delegated proof of stake, the way that we're doing the emission schedule. But the core technology, it's there. We're just applying it a little bit differently. We're going to take advantage of these things and all this knowledge that we've learned, whether it's through our own turmoil and trials, right, with Turtle, or some of our previous history doing other stuff. We've learned lessons elsewhere that let's take that knowledge and apply it. So it is exciting to think about. I think I made one of the jokes down in the down in one of the blog articles where I said, hey, I wonder how long the chain will fit on a floppy disk, a 1.4 meg floppy disk.
Oh man, or a zip disk.
A zip disk, yeah,
would the zip
baby.
disk fill up first, or would we get the click of death first?
Probably the click of death first, in all honesty. I can't find a parallel port to save my life. That's all I can say.
Yeah, same here, man. I used to run my zip drive, and then the zip drive had 2 parallels on it, and I would run my printer through it. But anytime you would hook up the printer to it, the zip disk would just like short the fuck out and just not even work.
Nope, I get you 100% there. And the best advice or the best information or advice, depending on how you want to say it, that I can really give you about the transaction sizes going into V2 is that they are going to be a little bit different than some of the articles have mentioned before. Because again, the articles up until this point have largely been driven by the thought process that we were going to use Arcturus. And as we found out in our last episode, right before it, Arcturus has some gaping holes in it that make it unsuitable for anything really.
For the time being, at least.
Exactly, for the time being. But
and not to discount that work, it's great work and everything. It's
for sure. For sure. I mean, when I came across it and I started reading through it and I did it in the code, man, you talk about hairs on your arms raising. I mean, I'm pretty sure I had to go change my shorts. Like, it was like, this is the cat's meow. This is the best thing ever. Unfortunately, so far it's been a little too good to be true, until hopefully somebody smarter than myself can figure out something to possibly fix it here. But in the meantime, what I'm working on building out is the Turtle implementation of Triptych, which was basically the precursor to Arcturus and the upgrade, so to speak, that from CLSAG that again the MRL kind of put together, and a lot of the work that Sarang did. Triptych is very kind of similar to Arcturus, but it doesn't have quite the size performance or the storage performance that Arcturus does, because we aren't able to combine multiple inputs into one proof anymore. So we will be back to a signature for each input that's contained within a transaction. However, this is why pruning is as important as it could be, right? When I talk about pruning the transactions, it doesn't matter how big that signature is or how big the signatures are as part of the transaction, because once we've established that trust, that the producers and the validators did their things, I reduce those signatures down, no matter which ones they are, which proofs they are. I reduce them down to 32 bytes. So it's stored that way permanently in the chain. It's just 32 bytes. So it might be a little bit bigger to transfer around in the memory pool, but when it settles on chain, still 32 bytes.
It's pretty cool.
It is. It makes me excited. That's why I kind of took the hit of Arcturus. Like, man, this kind of sucks. Hopefully they're able to work through it. But when I stepped back and I got back from that little bit of disappointment, like, oh man, that kind of sucks. And I thought about it for a second. I'm like, wait a minute, this doesn't really impact the actual chain storage too much in the end. And it took me like 5 or 6 hours, and I probably had, a couple of smokes and probably a drink. I'm like, wait, we're okay. This isn't a bad thing.
I mean, it's still drastically a better position than we're in V1.
Oh, for sure. For sure. The sad thing is that one of the things that will have to be adjusted is the base fee, the amount of bytes that you get for the bare minimum fee in a transaction. That's going to have to go up a little bit, to account for the bigger signatures.
What if we did something where, I don't know, this probably doesn't make sense, but if it's just a transaction, keep it the base fee with just a regular amount of transaction pow. And then maybe if it's a transaction that requires, some extra metadata and things like that, maybe then start assessing extra fees.
So I kind of thought through that a little bit, in some of the discussions that we've had with people in the chat, like, hey, look, this minimum fee is insane. What do you mean I got to pay for it? I've kind of thought through that a little bit, and based upon the information that I'm able to pull from the blockchain cache, right? There's nothing better than having a blockchain stored in SQL, by the way, because you can just run queries all day long on data. And I wish I had a licensed copy of Crystal Reports on me. But anyways, the information that you can pull out of there shows us pretty much where the average transaction sits, if that makes sense. Like size wise, number of inputs, number of outputs, it shows us what a normal transaction is in V1. And while that does not directly correlate to V2 transactions because of the changes that we're making, the masked amounts, no longer having to match up amounts like that, the difference in the structures, what it does give me is a baseline understanding of how people are transacting. And I kind of took that into account when I was building in what I'll call I want to call it the free zone, but it's not the free zone, right? I'll call it the base fee zone. That is that 0.01 turtle per transaction. I built that in there with the understanding of the size, the number of chunks of data that could be included for that fee would cover, like I said before, anywhere from 95 to 99% of the transactions. So generally speaking, unless you're doing something crazy, that's probably all that you're going to pay, if that makes any sense.
It does, and fingers crossed. Otherwise, we'll be crucified for it.
Probably just me, because I'm pretty sure I'm the only one with my government name all over the place, right?
Oh, yeah, true. That's right.
But that's okay. I don't own firearms, but I have what they like to call fuck you money. I'm going to leave.
So how is that trash island coming?
I don't know. Where's Roger at? I'm sure we could pull that would make for an interesting podcast, in all honesty. If we could drag Roger on here and tell him and find out, first of all, where's Z's money? Second of all, a trash island, like all the other problems in the world, and you want to build it up, but that's totally off topic.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode. I wish we could take a whole episode to explore, first of all, where does the poo go?
I'm not even sure that I want to know.
Just saying.
No, but
these are the questions we have to ask in 2021.
We're halfway through the year, right?
God damn, you're right. Sure are.
Yeah. I thought about that the other day. Halfway through 2021, somebody looked at the countdown timer and they're like, look, there's 160 days left or whatever it is. And then I looked at a calendar and I go, fuck.
I wonder how long it would take
4 months away.
What if you change the verb Explorer that's like, this is how many days until coin burn? Do you think people would pay attention then?
I'd like to think so, but honestly, I don't know that people look at the front page of the Explorer too much. But the thought has crossed my mind to take that purple banner, the V2 launch status, and throw it across all the pages, because I know for damn sure that all the people that have been going back and forth, sending funds back and forth through exchanges of the last couple of weeks, they're clicking on the view transaction links in there that's taking them to the Explorer, right? And it would get to grab their attention. And I'm not saying that, we would want to do that to try to motivate them to do anything, but I don't know that it's, like we talked about before, I don't know that it's clicking for people that, 87.5% is more than 50%. And this is a real burn. the coins just will never exist, So I don't even know that I call it a burn. Maybe it's just a what's the word I want? Coin abortion.
I mean,
is that too rough?
That's not just ripping off the Band-Aid. That's like kicking the door in.
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, look, it's the only way that you can prove that your coin burn is, not going to turn into a rug pull. Vitalik, holler back.
Well, hey, in all honesty, I don't think that was his fault.
Yeah, well,
unless we're doing root cause analysis and we figure out could they have done this without ETH, right?
Right.
But most people don't think that way.
What do you think the biggest criticisms are going to be? Like, because at this point, I'm completely going to title this episode 87% coin burn. And just leave it at that.
Probably, if I had to guess, I think a lot of the criticism is going to come from people that didn't make it into the 4-year pre-mine. That's probably going to be some of the big criticisms. And then I think there's still a lot of people that really are not going to understand the mechanics of the emission, so they're going to wonder like, hey, look, you guys are cutting it from 1 trillion coins down to, 1.25 million coins, right? And then you're telling me you don't know when or if more are ever going to be produced. I mean, I don't know that it's going to be criticisms, maybe is the right word, but just a lot of questions,
as the guy that runs the Explorer, you definitely have your work cut out for you, because I'm trying to think like in my head programmatically how I would even display that type of supply data. I got to be real with you. I'm at a loss here, and it's not just because I'm a shitty programmer.
Well, we've kind of talked about that very loosely.
You would have to be like indexing historic data.
Well,
I could see a graph like emission this month versus last month, or emission today versus, whatever, and then tracking the average between the amount of transactions and the average fee across different transaction sizes, etc.
So it's funny that you say it that way, because there's actually going to be a couple of different ways to think about the supply when we talk about V2. And I'm probably going a little bit off into the weeds here, but you bring up a very interesting point for the Explorer standpoint. In a lot of ways, there's still a circulating supply. And to be clear here, when we're talking about circulating supply, we're talking about coins that are free to move within the network. I can send them to you, you can send them to me, we can send them to anybody that we want. It's just circulating supply. Then there's coins that are locked up in a stake, right? Whether it's staking a candidate or a vote, right, for a candidate, those funds are going to be locked for a certain amount of time when you stake a candidate or you vote for a candidate. I haven't determined what that minimum amount of time is yet, but they're going to be locked up. They will not be circulating coins for that reason, because they are not free to move until they're unlocked. And while they are staked, whether they're locked or not, they're still not free to move. So it kind of comes, I don't want to say out of the circulating supply, but at some point it does move from the circulating supply to the stake supply, right? So you got to add those together to come up with the total supply. But there's a third pool of coins at play here, isn't there? There's those that have been slashed and permanently burned from bad performing nodes or bad performing producers and validators. We have to track those as well to understand how many coins are being burned on I hope it's not that many, right? But let's be honest, how many coins are being burned on a daily, monthly, basis? So there's actually like 3 or 4 different
factors.
Yeah, three different factors to what supply is that makes up the total supply. But then again, when I think about total supply, the burn coins from slashing doesn't count towards the total supply because those are never coming back, But the yeah, I think the total supply will be the circulating plus the stake coins. And then the circulating supply, like I said, is the stuff that's free to move. And then you've got your staked circulation.
So whenever I think about it, it would probably be like a bar graph with 3 different color bars for each interval, whether it be day, month, whatever. And one would be circulating coins, staked coins, and burned coins taking place during that interval.
That's probably fair, and I don't know that a bar chart would make the most sense. I mean, I'm thinking about the
Or
network
like a
chart.
multi-line chart.
Yeah. I'm thinking like the filled line chart, like what we've got on the front page of the Explorer today, right? That shows
like what we use for difficulty and all that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that could look good over time, kind of like the network charts where it goes a little bit further back. So we'll be able to graph the stuff, and we will be able to do it, in time. So that way we can see what has occurred over the last, 30, 60, 90 days, however we want to kind of graph it. Or in all honesty, aside from, having the mechanics in place that track all this stuff within the node, I'd love to see what other people would put together in this regard. Because yeah, I've got my mindset of how I'd put together the Explorer, but that may not be the best. I mean, think about the first Explorers that we had launched that were the forks of forget which one it was called, but
it's like Node, CryptoNode, Explorer, or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. And people made their own little tweaks to it, right? And then at one point, I overhauled it and said, "Hey, look, let's give it the same standard look, the same standard feel. Let's clean it up a little bit. Let's make it newer, right? And flashier and Web 3.0 it." And we did that work, and it was good. And then somebody like Daniel came across and cleaned up a lot of the responsiveness. And I'd like to see what a designer would do for in V2 with the same types of data, but just kind of laid out differently in some of the different points. Because to your point, the block reward is not fixed. We don't know what it's going to be for the next block because it's based upon the transactions contained within it. And the emission just doesn't exist. It just doesn't.
This has given me some ideas with regards to Rock Wallet. Maybe like a stats page is in order. Maybe that's outside of the, but it seems like it'd be pretty useful to have a page that displays, metrics that are pulled from your daemon.
Agreed. I mean, there's going to be some other cool interfaces that are going to come across from the staking, perspective. Because obviously all the information about the staking is going to take place, within the nodes, and everybody will be able to see the election process is repeatable, all that kind of good stuff. So we'll be able to put together pages in the Explorer that say, "Hey, look, here's the list of all of the announced candidates on the network. Here's how many votes they have, right? Here's the last time that they produced a block. Here's the last time that they validated a block. Of the last 15 times that they've been told that they're allowed to produce a block, how many times did they actually produce the block," right? There's going to be tons of additional information coming across and things like Explorers. And then importantly, from your point of view, from the Rock Wallet side, there's parts of that you're going to want to expose to users, because when they do go to stake and send in those votes, you want them to have the knowledge, so they're not just voting on whoever the hell they found in the Reddit thread that week that said, "Oh my God, vote for me. I'll get you all the coins in the world."
If it's hero stakers, I swear to God, I'm jumping in traffic.
Hero stakers.
So that brings up an interesting, question. I wonder if we'll see the same type of, like, I don't want to say like cult mentality, but like people all flocking to one staker, and how that'll kind of, or people flocking to, like, let's say a certain candidate or certain like staking pool or whatever ends up, whatever construct that is analogous to like a mining pool. I wonder if we'll see that in V2, because the only thing I could think of is somebody jumping on one candidate until they become excluded from the pool, because we're in the name of fairness, we're chopping off the top end and the bottom end of all the stakers. So it kind of makes me wonder, like, at what point is it going to become an arms race to manipulate the average to kind of make sure that, or maybe like, let's say there's a staking pool that you don't like or something like that. Maybe you just stake the shit out of them until they're no longer a valid candidate.
You know, I've given some of those thoughts at play only because, there's probably a few people that, I gotta be honest, even I might stake the hell out of them to keep them off the list if I knew that it was them. But that's besides the point. But, thinking that through a little bit, could there still be staking pools? Absolutely. However, in my mind, it's not a question of, here's my stake, you manage it for me, and just throw it at, that pool's, candidate node. It'll probably be a more active kind of staking pool process. And when I say active, it's like a managed staking.
Well, you know how Monero Ocean works currently, how they kind of look at the most profitable currencies and kind of switch between mining them. I think it'll probably be something where it's like an automated process where the staking pools are looking at the different candidates to see who's overstaked and all this, and it'll probably try to aggressively settle to a middle ground somewhere.
Agreed. And, it's going to be interesting to see how that type of stuff plays out because, as we talked about before, those stakes are going to require a minimum staking period, right? So if they make a bum decision for 3 blocks, they're probably going to have to live with it for a handful more, right?
I'm tempted to say it should be a lot longer than that, just to keep people from hopping around or trying to manipulate things. Because if it's a span of like 100 blocks or 500 blocks or 1,000 blocks or something like that, I mean, it kind of weeds out the bullshitters a little bit.
Oh, agreed. And that's why I've kind of hesitated to throw out any specific numbers because I know that it can't be 10 blocks, right? That's just crazy. But, to your point, 100, 500, 1,000 that it's staked for a minimum.
Well, given that there's not really,
that changes the game. That changes the rules of the game considerably at that point.
There's the added complexity, though, that there's not really like a hard block interval either.
This is true. I mean, those 1,000 blocks could take 6 months. They could take 5 minutes. We don't know.
It could turn into Athena overnight. You never know.
But yeah. To that point, there very well could be those staking pools that are heavily managed. Who knows? Maybe somebody could write some AI and kind of figure it out with all the variables at play. And I'm sure somebody will put something together. But obviously, it's not something that in my mind that I'm putting any focus on.
You know what's exciting about it?
Go ahead.
Regardless of what they come up with, it's going to be original.
Absolutely. Is it going to be original?
There's no node CryptoNote stake or anything like that.
Agreed. And to kind of segue off that a little bit, I'm interested from the aspect of the thought process that staking pools may not be the only pools.
Are you talking about POW pools?
Exactly. So
for transaction mining?
Exactly. There's a chance that, and this is part of the reason why I haven't put any hard limits on that extra space on the transactions yet. Only for, I want to see how it plays out is really the answer here. In that a transaction POW pool. So we know that we have to mine transactions to get over that POW requirement, regardless of the minimum fee. And we know that mining additional POW on those transactions can discount the fee down to the minimum and no lower, right? So there's a chance for some arbitrage there that if a transaction was going to cost me, let's say it was going to cost me 1 turtle descent. It's a very expensive transaction, right? But if
At
I
that
am
point,
able
what the
to,
hell are you even doing?
yeah, don't, nothing to see here, move along, right? So, but just pretend with me, right? I've got a transaction that cost me 1 turtle a cent. That's my base transaction fee. But I know that if I'm able to throw enough pow at it that it would take me personally, with my Threadripper to complete even the base pow, it might take me an hour to figure that out, right? And if I wanted to discount that down to half a turtle, instead of the 1 turtle, that it might take me 24 hours to hash that, right? And find a POW that matches. And these are extreme examples. If I was able to submit that transaction, and again, at this point, they're unsigned, so it's not like they can go fiddling with stuff. But if I was able to submit that incomplete transaction to a transaction POW pool that mines the POW for me, right? And that cost that they charge me to do that is less than the difference there. So I'm saving money by sending it to them and paying them something overall.
Then it makes it worth it.
Then it makes it worth it. And those transaction POW pools are picking up a little bit of scratch, right? They can still use their GPUs and CPUs that, man, sorry, we've had to shelve them because of moving to the delegated proof of stake. I kind of like this aspect because I know that our user base has set up rigs, right?
And it gives everybody a chance to get in where you fit in.
Exactly. So if you don't want to stake, you don't want to lock up your funds, that's great. If you don't have the resources or the technical wherewithal to set up a node and run as a candidate, that's great as well. If you love mining and you like running rigs, there may be an opportunity for you here, but again, this isn't software that I see myself putting together anytime soon. But,
and I'd imagine those rewards would be few and far in between. Like it would have to be like some type of merge mine situation where you're just mining something else constantly, but happen to also be contributing to the proof of work. Because I mean, shit, how often are we going to have people that are making like unscrupulous transactions with 1 turtle fee?
well, agreed, and that's where some of that delta comes into play. Because even if it was 0.05 turtle, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not. I mean, that's really just an extra kilobyte of space on a transaction right now. It's not a lot. For them to get a discount to take it down to 0.01 turtle, that might take them 16 hours, with the new machine to do it. But who knows? If they send it to a pool, maybe it takes 15 minutes, and they'll save 0.04 so they can afford to pay them 0.02 turtle. So it might turn into a scenario that they don't necessarily pay per transaction type of thing, but maybe those pools could set it up so it's a service, right? Especially if you were operating like a messaging application or something else like that. Maybe those pools set it up as a service where you go in there and you prepay them. Maybe you prepay them a turtle, and then you can send through 70 transactions or 100 transactions or whatever it is, and they'll mine them for you. Even if you wanted to send them in a transaction that was only going to incur the base fee of 0.01. So what the reason that I say this is think about the mobile experience, right? We talked about that POW side on the transactions. It's going to take time. It's going to take resources. I don't want to say that it's going to hurt, but you're going to notice it, right? As part of that process.
I hope that there's not people listening to this thinking that they're going to be the ones that have to spend 16 hours hashing something, because that just doesn't even seem realistic. And I don't know if we're really driving the point home enough that this is not even going to be the normal experience for most people. The majority of transactions are only going to do a short amount of proof of work. And, I hope that there's not people out there that translate this as, oh, well, the TurtleCoin guys are saying that, it's going to be 16 hours per transaction unless you pay to mine it. And this is just another way for people to, I don't know, whatever, insert conspiracy here. But I hope the majority of the critical listeners listening to this and thinking that they're going to be excluded from the network, I hope that they're realizing that this will probably never be them. Unless there's just like some really weird random edge case that they're just trying to, I don't know, like stick an entire binary on the chain or something like that.
Yeah, an entire distro. But yeah, to that end, and I'm glad that you kind of cleared that up because I know I was getting kind of excited there. But I mean, even from the standpoint, like we've talked about before, most transactions to mine the POW for most users, it's not going to take forever. Even that base amount might take. I think some baseline measurements that we've had so far is somewhere in the order of like 3 or 4 seconds on the slow or on the fast end. And, even on the high end, it's like 15 seconds. So it's not like it's forever, right? And that's on reasonably recent hardware. So, I mean, even some older stuff, sure, it might take 20 seconds. But if you've ever used a hardware wallet, then 20 seconds is nothing to you. But, kind of driving at that fact, when I think about things like the mobile experience and the opportunities there, if somebody wanted to set up a pool to mine mobile transactions, because I know that there's a lot of mobile devices out there that are slow, right? They are not fast. They don't have access, or it's not easy to bring cryptographic primitives onto that hardware. I mean, it's possible. It's just not easy. If you construct the transactions on your phone and even offloaded them to something else like a pool that's able to mine those, it may be faster for a mobile experience. And again, it's one of those maybe what ifs, right? Would it affect most people? Absolutely not. But it's interesting to think about the ways that additional services or additional pools, or however you want to say it, could spin off of these changes before we even talk about, what else can we build on the application stack on the chain, right? Is there a possibility of contracts coming? Is there all these things? Just think about all the additional services that will be enabled just on the economic side of the chain itself, right? When we're talking about turtle to turtle.
I think contracts themselves could be an entire episode.
Let's get Cucumber Token launched first.
CucumberToken.com, everybody.
Yeah, everybody go out to cucumbertoken.com, take a look around. It's going to be the best, newest thing ever. You're all going to love it.
There's probably people like already typing up their angry Reddit thread. I can't believe it. This is an outrage.
And if you're not a big fan of the .com, you can go to cucumbertoken.net or cucumbertoken.org, and you'll find the same site. Everybody loves it. Get on board now. Before block 5 million.
For the uninitiated, we're not going to rebrand to Cucumber Token. I wouldn't do that to you guys.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I won't have a lull out of it, though.
We should have scheduled the V5 launch for like April 1st or something like that, and just shipped the client on the first day with Cucumber Token branding.
Oh hell! Change the icon and everything.
Dude, people would be so mad.
Cucumber slice, I love it.
These devs aren't serious. They're not working for our money.
You're damn right. I'm not working for your money. You haven't paid me yet, fools.
I'm not even working for my own damn money at this point.
Yeah, that's true.
Man, so I guess that kind of takes care of the whole fee thing and the whole transaction slimness thing and the coin burn thing. I think we pretty much got all the loose ends tied up there. What kind of objections do you think we're gonna hear from this? What kind of questions do you think we're gonna have?
Well, I think they're gonna stop asking us coin burn when. Objections? Again, I don't know that I don't know,
Has there been a longer or more widespread pre-mine in history?
Not that I can, not that I
Not
can
even
think
ant
of.
shares.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when did the U.S.
Bitcoin Cash.
require that you turn in your silver dollars?
Oh God, that's a long time, dude.
Yeah,
I don't even
I
know if you can
mean
compare it.
that's close. Like maybe because that was a long time. There was an effort before one of the wars, right, where yeah, you had to turn in and sell your gold to the government, right?
Yep,
I
I
mean, so
remember that.
technically that was a pre-mine, but in recent years, no, I think this is definitely the longest pre-mine ever.
Unless you count like all the forks of Bitcoin or whatever other coin that mints out for existing balance holders.
I'm not sure that I would include that in there, But then
Yeah, it's
again,
not even the same.
it's hard because if we don't include that in there, because in some ways, even though we're doing a swap, it's almost kind of a little bit like the same idea, except I guess the biggest difference there is that as far as I know, the community holds all the coins here, or the vast majority of them.
Ooh, I got a zinger here. Something that I was thinking about while you were explaining that is, I wonder if we're going to see anybody who tries to do hostile takeover of the V1 chain to keep it running. And you suppose are the pitfalls we're going to see with that? Because I'm sure there's going to be some people that are going to be tempted to be double dipping on both sides during V2.
Oh, I'm sure of it. That there's going to be. I fully believe that people will try to maintain the chain, but I don't know that they're going to be able to. Just from the standpoint that, not that I'm trying to taunt here, but like we've talked about before, there's only so many people that come in and they contribute. So
Well, I
it all.
mean, like I would love that the success of a chain become coupled to the actual output of the dev team, but so far we haven't seen that. So I think like any person that just comes along and says that they're going to keep the chain going, I think that that person will have like, I don't know, maybe like a month to 3 months of success, meaning not like success meaning like a stable chain, but success meaning like keeping the community's interest or keeping people from redeeming their coins into V2. And I think that once they kind of inevitably disappear or do a shitty job or end up just coasting, with minor cosmetic changes or maybe like one or two features, I think they'll probably end up like either rug pulling or just like rebasing to Monero or something like that and pretending that that was the plan all along.
Well, exactly. I mean, and then there's also the aspect that let's
How many people are going to be
let's
pissed?
just play this out real quick. Like, let's say that you did want to continue the chain after the fact. You've
I
got
don't, but go ahead.
it's just a game, right? So somebody wanted to do this. They've got to rewind out 1,000,000 blocks, depending on when they come in and they try to do it. And on top of that, you've got 100% of the current supply is in hands that you don't control. And you would never control those, right? There's no way that you could ever take control of those. I mean, whether they're redeeming them for V2 or you try to fork the chain before the swap starts, right?
They would have to hard fork, like implement a hard fork consensus change to different checkpoint or something like that and rewind a year in the past. They'd have to patch the difficulty. Oh man, it'd be an uphill battle. It would almost have to be something like people say like, oh, well, we're going to launch our own V2 chain and you can swap to our chain or whatever.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting to. I mean, if 100% of the supply when they go to try to fork is not within their control, right, and it's just floating out there, and their goal is to maintain the chain, that will exist in perpetuity, right? 12.5% of the supply will just never exist in their user base, except for the people that would hold over and stay with them, yada, yada, yada.
That's a pretty large like sword of Damocles hanging over their head.
Exactly. And just from the standpoint that for the next 6 months, let's give them benefit of the doubt that they can make it to 6 months. 6 months after that happens, you've maybe mined, another 2 billion coins out, if you maintain the chain as is. So that's
nothing.
That's a tenth of what the total supply is out there, that at any point the entire user base could come along and just sink your battleship, right?
What is a billion? What does a billion even cost right now? Like $25? I mean, that's suicide.
Hell if I know, right? But just think about the mechanics at play there. It's a harpoon in the side of the side, right? It's just going down.
I almost want somebody to do it just to see the blood flow.
Well, there
blood
are
for
days.
The blood god.
There are definitely days, but that's the challenge, is that it's not that. I mean, if they wanted to do something with it, if they want to do something with the fork base, or I'm sorry, with the code base, and I foreshadowed a little bit. Not that I want them going out there and forking the code and starting another shitcoin, but if they wanted to maintain the chain or the network, their best bet is literally just to fork the damn code and start from scratch again, because there's too much uncertainty there. But that's me giving, too much credence to people that generally can't, edit code except for in the web editor, so it's.
Oh, that's one of my pet peeves, man.
Exactly.
And
so
that's not to say
I just
that
don't.
I've never
I
done
don't
it.
see it happening. I really don't. To your
Yeah,
point,
it would-
maybe for a couple of weeks.
The thing that makes me fearful is that there's other people out there that are a little bit more greed motivated and aren't really using their critical thinking skills whenever it comes to, making these decisions. And I don't think that these people understand what they'd be wagering to forego the V2 swap. But I mean, like, that's not even like a threat. That's just like thinking logically. You can trade the people who have had you in good hands for the last few years, or you can just pick this random guy who promises that you may do well or something. I can't even think about it. Like, maybe the polar opposite of us walks in and we have I burn my DVD and Spock running the chain,
Sure.
and they just decide, hey, we're gonna start caring about price, and let's start doing whatever, all the tricks in the book that all the coins play to gain notoriety. I don't know. It's gonna be funny to see.
Yeah, and at that point, it's not even. It wouldn't be the project, right? To your point, that's just not what it's been the last 3 years. I mean, community aspect alone, the feelings behind the camaraderie, right? The relationships that are forged, good and bad. You don't just replicate that by forking the chain.
Yeah.
That just doesn't happen.
Yeah, you might be able to fork the code, but you can't fork the community.
Exactly. And even when you try, typically they come back. So just saying.
I hope it's not too much hubris on our parts, but I don't know. My educated guess is that there's a very small pool of people who could provide some type of value that would, logically sway people to not change their coins over to V2.
Agreed.
If anything, that would even further, that would even add to the burn.
Well, that is an interesting aspect that.
So how fast can we spin up one of these V? No, I'm just kidding, man.
It's
So it could be 87% coin burn plus whoever decides to bail out at that point.
Whoever doesn't redeem whatever coins are lost,
I just feel bad for the guy that's in jail for like too many parking tickets or something like that, and he comes out and he's like, "Well, we'll see what the old turtle's doing."
Oh shit! The chain's dead.
Yeah.
Well,
it's going to be a funny situation to deal with. There's bound to be some stragglers who are going to be like, dude,
my coins.
I had my keys buried in my backyard 100 feet down.
I synced to 5 million and then it stopped.
I think it's dead.
Man, speaking of that now, I almost want to ping extra and tell him I need him to put a little note in the GUI wallet saying like, just like flashing in their face.
That kind of would be smart now that you bring it up, like some type of like really obvious notification. It kind of makes me wish we had like that hand of God messaging that other early crypto notes had.
We can definitely try to work a hand of God into the nodes.
There has to be a way to like broadcast a cryptographically signed message so that people operating the nodes know, okay, this is coming from the devs. They're letting us know that it's time to update the software or whatever critical message there is.
Well, we could certainly do that, even pushing it down to the wallets as well, in all honesty, since they have to scan all the transactions.
True, I didn't even think about that.
I mean, it would only cost us 0.01 turtle to send the hand of God message. I mean, that's relatively cheap. I think between the two of us, we can rub 2 nickels together. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
2 pieces of pocket lint together and come up with 1,000 turtle.
Yeah. Man, I'm really, after this conversation, I'm even more jazzed for V2, even though like basically everything we discussed today has been under my nose the entire time. Just kind of putting it all out there. I think it's mainly the excitement of kind of catching me with their pants down and being able to press my hands firmly against my hips and say, well, what you going to do about that? 87%.
Whole lot of nothing we're doing with that 87%. We're just gonna pour the gas on it, light a match, and give it a flick. And I
mean, it's the most foolproof coin burn ever. Like the coins just never exist. There's nobody to second guess. There's nobody to pull the rug. There's nobody to ship coins off to Elon to send to Binance.
I just had this totally random thought come to my mind as I thought about pouring gasoline and lighting a match. And then you went there with sending them off to Elon and all that kind of stuff, right? But the entire time, my mind was running through this image of to put it in no certain terms here, filling up a stack of like oil drums filled with gas, right? And then lighting them as they're all welded together. And it launches into the air, kind of like a rocket. Is that the term? You know what I'm saying?
Would you say it would go to the moon?
I don't know. But
what about Mars?
I'll tell you what. Metaprinter would know. I mean, he's our resident rocket expert on whether or not it would get to the moon or Mars, right?
Yeah. Which one of you guys altcoins has a rocket aerospace division?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. None of them.
And we've put stickers on our rockets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm calling Elon out there. I'm not taking that whole SpaceX thing seriously anymore until I see a Dogecoin logo on the side of the rockets. Bigger,
it's Doge, right?
Doge, however you want to say it at this point. Really don't care. Until that logo of that dog is bigger on the side of the rocket than SpaceX, I'm not a believer.
Dogecoin is still proof of work, isn't it?
It's funny because with all the hype over the last couple of weeks, I went and took a look at it again because I'm like, you know what, I'm bored. It is still proof of work, but I swear to God, everything that I'm finding is that nobody mines it directly. It's just merge mined with LTC.
What the fuck?
But I could be wrong. I just literally had a hell of a time looking for a pool, and everything seemed to point to go mine Litecoin and merge mine it for Dodge.
You were trying to mine Doge, weren't you?
I wasn't trying to.
Don't lie to me.
Some of us have better halves that, just tell us to do things. Otherwise, they'll get the sizzles.
That sounds like what had happened.
That's exactly how that went down.
Cool, man. Well, let's wrap it up. Everybody, thanks for listening. For those of you that aren't part of the subreddit, go to trtl.reddit.com. Make sure to check out our YouTube at youtube.com/TurtleCoin if you're listening to this somewhere else. And don't be afraid to pop in the chat and tell us about your ideas and comments and whatnot about this episode at chat.turtlecoin.lol or discord.gg/turtlecoin. Everybody have a good night. Go fuck yourselves. See you later.
Good night. Yourselves.
I hope you recorded all that.